Enabling Resilience in Manufacturing, a series of virtual panel discussion unlocking the impact of digital transformation on key areas of the manufacturing domain. I am Raudra Bhattacharya, and in today's episode, we will be discussing how manufacturing analytics can be utilized for effectual measurement. How can organizations set up a robust measurement system using analytics, increasing efficiency, quality, and decreasing operating costs? I will let our experts answer. I'm very happy to introduce you to all our panel today. We have Mr. Rajesh Uppal, member of the Executive Board, HR, IT and Safety at Maruti Suzuki India, Mr. Mayur Danayat, Chief Information Officer, Pidilite Industries Limited, Mr. Nabuat Ullah Khan, Practice Head for Manufacturing and IoT Analytics at SAS, Mr. Piyush Arora, Executive Director Operations at Mercedes-Benz India, Marcia Elaine Walker, Global Industry Principal Manufacturing at SAS, and Mr. Sharad Kumar Agarwal, Chief Digital and Information Officer, JK Tyre and Industries Limited. A very warm welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us today. We will begin the session with a keynote address by Nabuat Ullah Khan. This will be followed by a panel discussion where our experts will share their thoughts on today's topic. Without further ado, let's get started. I would first like to invite Mr. Khan to begin his keynote speech.
Thank you, Raudra. If you could just give me presenter rights, I'll share my screen and get started.
Done.
Thank you very much. Right. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I know this is the third series with Mint that we are running in terms of the overall nuances of how should we look at the manufacturing organization. Rather than trying to boil the entire ocean, let's try to break the entire organization into independent vertical and then try to look at solving specific problems. Right. So that was the theme that we started off the entire series with Mint. And now today here we are talking about the overall aspects of measurement today. Right. So just a quick glimpse on a background before I get started. Thank you very much again for being the participants who are constantly in touch with us. And I see a couple of names where I identify a few of the names which were present in the previous sessions as well. Thank you again, everyone. So the overall aspect, like I said, was to go ahead and look at the 5 critical ends of analytics within the manufacturing realm. Right? When we try to break down the overall arcane of the organization, there are 5 critical pillars that we perceive where analytics can definitely help the manufacturing organizations in improving their critical KPIs. So for that, we went ahead with hosting the first session on the materials, which covered the entire aspects of how do we better plan our supply chain, or in fact, how do we plan our forecasting, or how do we plan our raw material inventory, and so on and so forth. So we went ahead with covering those aspects on the supply chain front under material. Then under manpower, we spoke about how do we try and leverage automation, given the nuances of COVID impact that everyone went through. How do we keep our lights on? What exactly can analytics do there? And so on and so forth. Then we switched gears from manpower to machinery. Under machinery, we spoke about how can we go ahead and move away from the planned or the preventive maintenance strategies to a predictive in nature kind of a construct, using the technologies like AI, talking about IoT, AI, ML, and so on and so forth. And now, today we are here to talk about measurement, right? So measurement is one of the critical aspects, again, which actually will help the organizations in taking those strategic calls on how do we move towards either reducing or increasing, depending on whatever we are trying to measure, either reducing the downtime or increasing the profitability and so on and so forth. Right. So those are the aspects that we will touch upon today under the under the measurement metrics. And last session probably will be closing about the overall aspects of method. Right. So that's the key construct. So now getting into the key aspect of measurement. So this is a very well known problem. Right, there are a lot of versions available online where everyone keeps talking about if you cannot measure anything, you cannot improve it. That's a known term. I don't want to dwell much more on it, but the reality is right in front of us. We may be looking at various aspects. We may be generating a lot of data internally. Are we aligning them to the right set of KPIs for the organizational uplift or organizational growth? Is the question that we are trying to solve for, right? So, in order to do that, we definitely need to go ahead and abide by this particular statement, which says we will have to ensure that we are able to measure the key metric or measure the key structure that we want to improve. Now, the important aspect is while the organizations definitely have tons of metrics in place, they have tons of data in place, there are multiple metric systems, there are multiple measurement units, there are multiple performance and business metrics which are circulated internally, right? Not all the metrics may be identical for one specific organization, or you cannot find exact cut, copy, paste kind of metrics across organizations. So, what exactly are we trying to lay here is every business is unique. There are a few metrics which definitely will have spillover, and there are a few metrics which are aligned towards the specific requirement of the organization, and there are a few metrics which are aligned towards specific structure in terms of the long-term strategy goal that is positioned within the organization. So while there is so much of noise with respect to all of this, are we going ahead and measuring the right thing at the right time? Is the biggest question that we need to ask for. That gets me to this particular slide where we talk about the key aspects. What do we do when we talk about measuring something today? Let's assume that my top of the funnel is my input and the bottom receiver or a beaker is my output. Do we actually go ahead and measure everything with respect to the input process and the output, or are we just looking at something which is called as input and the output? Do we also measure the overall noise that comes into play when we talk about the overall process? Right? So those are the key questions. So that actually gets us to a realm of understanding as to how does individual look at some measuring metric. Does he look at the overall measuring metrics as a complete end-to-end process of looking at the inputs, the process, the noise, and the output? Or are they just looking at the input versus output? Or a few of the cases where they're just talking about input, process, and the output? Right? Noise is something which actually gets lost in the air. There are multiple type of noises. Again, if I may talk about that at length, but I want to get your focus onto the noise section in a bit. Before I go there, here is a key slide which talks about a few of the common metrics that we've seen across various organizations that we've interacted with globally. Right? So when I tried segmenting this into 4 different sectors, one is specifically tagged towards a production unit or a production house, and then a few of them which are aligned towards the suppliers, a few of them which are aligned towards the customers, and a few of them which are totally evident or in fact most required for employee satisfaction as well. Right? So those are the kind of themes that I'm trying to lay around with. Now, when we talk about these specific structures again, most of the organizations definitely will have these in some shape or form. There may be a few of the names here and there, but these are the key ones which everyone tries to track internally. And specifically, all of these fall under the equilateral triangle of time, cost, and quality. Right? So that's how I look at this entire spectrum of the measuring KPIs and the metrics. Having said that, the important aspect that I want to paint, again, picking up from a previous slide, is on the overall bias that we create as humans. When we're talking about these critical KPIs that we're trying to measure, the important aspect to note for is the noise that I was talking about earlier. The noise in the entire process, the bias that we create is something which leads us to taking certain amount of not so robust actions or not so strategic actions. We may tend to dilute the overall outcome that we are expecting. And there are various type of biases out here. Right? So when we talk about the specific bias that I want to talk about is on the selection stuff, on the observation, and the socially desirable bias. So these are the 3 evident biases that come into play where we tend to go ahead and select a small subset while we're trying to calculate our critical KPIs and tend to go ahead and assume that this small subset is equivalent to my larger gain. Is that the right thing? The answer is no. Then a few of the options that we actually get our hands dirty with is going ahead and looking at the observational bias and the socially desirable bias. Something which is good for me, I may have a question that may satisfy me, but ultimately, when I try to translate that as an outsider and look at it as an outsider, I may be just looking at my own individual gains out there, but I may not be equally contributing to the overall organization's uplift. Right? So those are the critical aspects. Now, this can be closely tied up to a classical example of a World War II plane, right, which you see on the right hand side of the screen here, where we actually this study is a very unique study where we spoke about, or in fact, the author has spoken about all of these aircrafts, all of those red dots that you see on this airplane are those planes which actually came back to the airfield after it went out for an operation. Right? A few of them never returned. And the aspect again here clearly says because the few of the data scientists back then had some sort of tendency of getting biased with looking at these bullet shots and bullet marks on the plane, and they went ahead with over empowering, or in fact went ahead with adding more layers for protection specifically on those back then figured out was while we had 90% of those aircrafts which came back with the bullet marks on the same spot, there were areas which were not marked at all, and the aircrafts which never returned probably got shot at those marks. Right, so those are the interesting aspects of the bias that played here to a larger set of data scientists when they were looking at solving a specific problem of avoiding crashes or losing the assets back then was they were just looking at where was it shot the most. Nobody tried looking at the aspects of where what are those planes where can I identify a certain planes where I see a different pattern altogether. Have I received even a single plane back without these areas being covered, right? So those are the aspects that predominantly play around our minds, and that's exactly where analytics actually comes into play, right? To ensure that it not only tries to take human views, but it also has its own brain to go ahead and tell you or give you those signals which are probably most evident in the need of the hour at this particular point in time. Now, how do we overcome this bias, right? So we all know that there's a lot of data sitting out there, specifically when we talk about manufacturing industries, be it as small as going ahead and raising a CRM ticket or a ERP ticket. We may have that kind of data getting generated to humongous amount of information which is coming in from the connected devices today. Right? There is a lot of data flowing in. Can we make use of all of that data? Can we align it back to the critical KPIs that we are trying to look at? Can we move away from our Excel-based reporting mechanisms? Can we try to let the machine learn from the historical trends and let the AI and ML go ahead and give us the key insights that probably we may be missing out? So that's the aspect that we are trying to uncover today, where we will talk about how can analytics as an overall arcing message help the organizations identify the right set of metrics to be measured back towards the right set of goals that the organization has laid out. Right. So that's the quick view. And I just want to give a quick glimpse in terms of how does the automated dashboard look like? Can I do this automated KPI tracking in a almost near real-time basis? If not real-time, can I at least have a near real-time basis? Can I have something which is getting constantly updated? Can I get cues on understanding by a click of a button as to what's exactly happening? This is very, very critical for the executives to take a quick call in terms of what's exactly happening out there. Why can I try to do something internally or externally to enhance and ensure that my critical KPIs are on track? Right. So those are the critical aspects that we want to talk about. And before I end, here is a QR code that I want to put forward because this is something which we worked with one of the research firms which talks about how digital transformation and smart manufacturing enterprises are getting shaped as we are talking right now. Please take a snap and you'll be able to download that ebook and we can take it from there. I guess that's it from me for now, Rodra. I think we'll open this up for panel and thank you very much. We'll see you soon again in the next webinar.
Thanks, Nabat. Um, Thank you for the presentation. I think that was very insightful, really interesting. Sets the ball rolling with great context for what we are going to discuss right now. Moving forward, I'm just going to start with our panel discussion, asking all our panelists to turn on their cameras and their audio as well. And Nabat, if you could stop the sharing. It's And for our audience, we have a Q&A section. Please share your questions in the Q&A section. We will also share two polls during the panel discussion to just keep things a little interesting. My first question, Nabat, I think you're still sharing the panel, the presentation. Okay. My first question is really a broad question, right? So, how can the effective measurement of metrics impact operational performance? Mr. Rupal, if you'd like to take a stab at that, and I will go around asking other panelists as well.
Okay, thanks, Rodra. I think the context has been set on the need for measurement and all. I think very clearly, if you want to run a business and you need to run a improvement plan in your business, that whole matrix is very important. Whether it's identifying what is working, what is not working, or identifying the business progress, or working out the help you right decision at the point to happen and all is the whole need for having this thing. I'll share some of the examples from my side to really look at that how do we really manage this kind of matrices and build it up. I think it's very right. One is that input side and output side, but I think the correlation between input and output, I think that's the key where, if you do that, then only output can be improved and all. I think that's the important of not only defining the right matrices, but also the correlation between matrices is very important to handle that and all. Like I'll give you an example. We're looking for a, process of measuring the inventories at our dealership, inventories at our spare parts and all in the company to handle that. Now, inventories are very simple matrices, how much number you have and such like that. But I think important point is, are your forecasting process right? Are you able to forecast the demand as required and all, and on which the whole dependence of inventories and everything around there and all. So finding that right correlation is very critical to know that what kind of matrix you want to improve, so that effective output is good and all. I think that's the key aspect of defining all the matrices around and then do that work and all. In my case, I think by improvement of demand forecasting by almost 100%, the inventory rates came down to almost, maybe number of days wise, I think it was, if I remember correctly, around almost half the inventories than what you used to have over there. Because by improving the forecast accuracy, both positive side and negative side of the forecast. So the whole effectiveness of measurement is something which is required. I'll give you another example. Now, we do a lot of project of digital and all those things to improve our business around and all. So the process what we identify is, let's have the key matrices as of now of the business and again building all the correlation around. And after the project and all start, for me, the project doesn't finish at the time of going rollout of the technology. The process gets over when the whole, we achieved what, the desired results of business matrices achieved or not. If not, you need to tweak that in between and all. I think importance is, if you run to a continuous improvement plan in our business, the effectiveness of measurement is very critical and the correlation of this metric is very important. And defining that for your industry, your company, I think is a key requirement for any business to do that.
So of course, one key point is defining the key end goal in terms of the business requirements, the business numbers that you need to meet and sort of matching that. But one sort of point here, right? Of course, reducing your inventories and accurate demand forecasting. Using that to make sure that your inventories are managed is great. But the last few months did see challenges, right? And when you're depending on a global supply chain, how do you sort of also tackle that? Because we did see companies find it very challenging when you had to meet a certain sort of production target, but your inventories were not adequate enough at that time. So how do you sort of tackle it with the situation there?
Okay. See, last few months have been challenging for everybody and all. I think, and supply chain disruption was a major challenge for our industry and our industry, as you know, one is that luckily it bounced back very fast, and also is too heavy dependent on our supply chain. All our suppliers then need to do that and all, and I think that was a critical. So all matrices around visibility is something became very critical. Now your supply chain path to up to tier 3, tier 4 level visible to the OEM so that you can understand where the bottlenecks are. And also if in case of some disruption happening there, your whole matrix to give, okay, what are the alternate options you have to handle that and all. So all matrices around that to be managed around and all. I think pandemic really, focused all of us to work on how do we really manage our risk when something has happened over there. And risk management was a key factor in last few months to look at that and work on those to handle that and all. That's one part of it. And secondly, which is another positive side of it and all which happened is, I think digital was never in focus so much as it has been now after pandemic. I think that's something which is right from our management discussions everywhere and all. Digital and matrices and all has become a center stage of discussion of pandemic. So that's the positive side of the thing that everybody think that, okay, this is opportunity because everything you discuss is on digital front, digital platforms and all discussion around with happening there. So the focus on digital and focus on this thing something very key change which I see in pandemic happening with all of us.
Right. I mean that's a theme that we've been getting.
Just add to that, and again my thought on this is the approach of in an organization and I think Naval discussed about the whole kind of metrics around. I think in any organization a right balanced scorecard principle approach of measurement is the right thing to do to handle that and all. I think if you can define that whole process in your organization, maybe later I can take in detail of that. I think that's the key way to handle that so that you are very, complete in your whole approach of measurement in organization. I think that's the key factor in deciding this.
Great. I would just want to bring in other speakers on the same point. Marcia, maybe you and then Mr. Durant. So basically the question is how can the effective measurement of metrics impact operational performance? Marcia?
Well, Mr. Paul actually addressed several of the things that I would have brought up as being key, such as visibility. So a lot of people are measuring things that they can't have visibility to. But one area I get really excited about is bringing context into that measurement. And I started my career on the automation side of the house, controls, more on the plant floor, sort of a myopic, small view of the data. And now with cloud technology, artificial intelligence, machine learning, you're able to get a really global view of the metrics that might be impacting your business, bringing in data sources that you might not have used in the past. So for example, in the pandemic, we've helped consumer packaged goods manufacturers combine epidemiological models from healthcare providers and from healthcare resources with their supply chain data to help understand how the spread of the pandemic might impact their supply chain. That would have been unimaginable 10 years ago. Another one of my favorite stories is from a small dairy manufacturer in North America. They typically had looked at their equipment performance only within the four walls of their factory, but by bringing in customer sentiment data from their call center, they were able to see certain customer complaints that, similar to Nabuth's airplane example, seemed a little bit out of pattern. And by bringing in the customer complaint data, they were able to actually find one particular homogenization machine on their plant floor that was not operating properly. 10 years ago, nobody would have ever thought, oh, let's combine the call center data with the plant floor data. But today, it's not only possible, but is bringing insights that people didn't have before.
Interesting. So combining data from various different sources and then sort of finding that insight. Mr. Dinayat, if you'd like to sort of,
Yeah, thanks, Rudra. I think a lot has already been spoken. So I'll try and take a different take on the question. To my mind, when you talk about metrics, these metrics are in any organization are at kind of two levels, right? First, is the set of metrics that describe the operational health of your process or your overall enterprise or your business. And that's the scorecard that Mr. Uppal was referring to. And if you're talking of supply chain, let's say, then you would typically look at metrics like forecast accuracy or forecast fidelity or customer fill rates, throughputs, inventory turns, and there's a bunch of metrics that you can select from. To my mind, these metrics do three things. So they tell you the true state of your performance, how well you're doing as a process. They help you in decision making. So you see a red somewhere and you go after that and try to fix that. And effectively, they help you keep your operations on stable and on schedule. So that's what your operational metrics or scorecards do. I think there is also another set of metrics or metrics at the next level, where you are talking about essentially improving or transforming a given process. And that's where I feel the very eloquent concept of objectives and key results comes in, or OKR as it's popularly known. So what end objective you want to achieve is really important to what you would measure, right? So if you are clear in what you are trying to achieve from a supply chain perspective or a sales operations perspective, then you would accurately define a metric to measure it and improve it on an ongoing basis. And like was rightly said in the presentation, if you can't measure something, you can't improve it. So for example, if as a supply chain manager, my objective is to improve or to achieve 100% automation of orders, then the metric for me to measure is percentage number of orders that were manually edited or manually changed or whatever. So I think or to sum it up, for operational stability, for operational performance, and for transformation of process, metrics are absolutely central.
Right. Mr. Arora, would you like to add here, how can the effective measurement of metrics impact operational performance?
Thanks, Rudra. For us at Mercedes, actually, all the innovations are customer-centric and they have to be driven customer-oriented. From my point of view, if I look at the bigger picture, and of course, I would like to start from what our vision is and how do we correlate it to the new innovations and the metrics and how do we measure that, is driven from a sustainability target which we have for ourselves for which we call as Ambition 2039, where we are talking about totally carbon-free footprint for our products and processes. And for me, digitalization is one of the key factor which is going to support us or help Mercedes globally to be able to focus on that. Not only it helps us in improving efficiency, but it also helps in making it more sustainable. Having said this, at our end, we have taken an initiative created a platform which is known as MO360, which is created with the operations people as well as our global IT infrastructure, wherein you are able to connect all the 30 different plants globally. And now, how does it help is when you collect the data and you have more or less in-time online sharing of information, then you can take decisions much better and much faster. And from that point of view, it improves the asset utilization, it improves what are you able to optimize as well as what you are able to change and correct. Now, during the time of pandemic, of course, you have faced a certain amount of challenges, which finally resulted into some disruptions. But when you have the connected information across your all manufacturing plants, it gives you a much better opportunity that you are able to fine-tune and your production planning colleagues are able to fine-tune the products as well as direct your supply chain in the right direction. Having said this, this is the global picture, but if I have to reflect this on India, the platform which I just spoke about is a scalable platform. And you can add depending on your market requirements and your requirements in your country. And we are exactly trying to do that so that we are able to make all the matrices. We saw those dashboards in the presentation. So I'm very happy to say that some of those kind of live dashboards is what we are utilizing and scaling our processes right now. Utilizing, of course, many digital platforms. The biggest advantage is that you get the live data, You can evaluate them at a regular frequency. You can define the frequency hourly, half means tech time driven, etc. And then you have the live information coming out from the various equipments, which are again through IoT platforms connected, so that you have the live information right available. Decision making and steering the process becomes very, very agile. Having said this, I would like to give another thought to this whole discussion as well. That one of the major, I would say, the targets for us is also flexibility. In a market like ours, where the demands are very varied, particularly for our kind of products, we have to maintain high degree of flexibility. And flexibility and quality go hand in hand. And from that point of view, there is a high degree of requirement for training people. And I'm very happy to mention it to you guys that we are utilizing the AR and VR platform today to train our people. And we have seen a lot of successes which these technologies can bring in. So Industry 4.0 elements, when they are integrated into operations in day-to-day basis, you can utilize them. I can cite an example that when we train new recruits through AR/VR technologies, we have seen 40% higher retention rate. And if you train your existing people and expose them to this kind of technology, you already see 15 to 25% retention rate, even better. And these are some of the elements which we are utilizing not only for decision making by collecting the data, but also utilizing them so that you can make your operations more flexible. Another example is, of course, during the pandemic time when people were not able to work and work from home was the normal norm. What do you do with the blue collar workers? So we created a platform for training online where through their own smartphones, they were able to access the training modules and keep themselves abreast with it. So I can only say that the IoT and the Industry 4.0 elements, apart from collecting these data for decision making, they are also helping in a much holistic way.
Right. Mr. Agarwal, would you like to add to this point? What sir said? Yeah.
Thank you, Rudra. So much has already been said, but what I would like to stress is that most of the matrices have been in place and aptly there. But now the change that is happening, the importance of the priority we need to put on the respective matrices. As Mr. Paul said that yes, yield is of course the higher the first time pass yield is, so it leads to the direct profitability. But now we have to look at other matrices like probably increased flexibility, agility in terms of adoption of change in a process due to non-availability of some raw material or some part which is not there, how quickly we can test it, change the recipe and make it going. Similarly, we can think of some external factors which were not part of the matrices, like the health quotient of all the employees. Not just the employees, but we have to take a feel from the social media also. Like in this pandemic times, what's the infection rate or infection propensity in a particular area? How do we tackle it? So that are becoming equally important. So and for manufacturing, some time back, I would say a decade or so back, we were more focused on internal matrices, but now we have to look for external matrices. Is my customer satisfied? Because ultimately we all are working for our customers. So these are certain matrices which are gaining importance. And with this pandemic, the priority has shifted. So what I'll say that the matrices priority determination is in flight. So we are taking them, we are evaluating them and grasping their importance with time relevant to our customers. Thank you.
Interesting. So what I understand from both Mr. Agarwal and Mr. Arora is that operational performance has several aspects to it. There's of course the customer angle and there's also the employee angle. I think one of the greatest things is that how have these technologies been utilized to digitally sort of enable upskill a lot of employees in the past few months as well. I'm just going to share a poll, our first poll. We have two polls today peppered in our conversation to sort of keep things interesting. Asking all our attendees to participate in this. It's live right now. We're going to keep it live for about 40 seconds. So the poll question is, what are the primary challenges you are facing in setting up a data-driven measurement system? And it's a multiple choice. So the options are lack of clarity regarding which data to use, lack of expertise in handling analytics, inadequate use of insights gained from data analysis, and or all of the above. And we are at just closing the poll. We are actually at a minute, and here are the results. Yeah. So 64%, all of the above, but 27% are actually saying a lack of clarity regarding which data to use. Interesting. So this might actually be the theme for the next set of questions. Mr. Opal, my next question is to you. What are some of the most important metrics to track with respect to the automotive industry? I mean, how can an effective measurement system supported by data analytics boost organizational growth? Sir, are you on mute?
Okay, coming to auto industry as a specific around, I think one is that what business parameter remains same, whether you are in auto or non-auto and all. Manufacturing focused is one area which is very clearly on production and efficiencies and those kind of things around in that. Customer and customer feedback become another segment of the thing around. So if you just take that along, I think I divide that into 5 different important dimensions, which normally, in our industry could be usable and to be managed. One, I think everything around customer and customer service around and all, whether it's from value front, from the customer satisfaction front, complaints, anything around customer is one big area of domain of metrics which we look at that. Second is the whole, product and services related around that. Your forecasting, your price sensitivities, your conversion ratios, and all list of areas to look at that. Third is very clearly, build in logistics around with supply chains and everything around that is a one fourth domain, third domain of area which we focus on. New product development is one new area which I think we didn't discuss in the initial area around. I think that also for us is a big area, right from whole looking at the customer preferences and things around that to the matrices of the whole operational aspect of the time taken for a new product development and development area around and all is the one big area. And last is very clearly people front. And now people front is again on right hiring and right attrition, training effectiveness, and everything around that is. So I think I'll put my whole thing into 5 different blocks of customer service, product and services, logistics, new product development, and people. And when I talk about product services, I think IoTs and the telematics, everything around comes under that sector, which is again is a large volume and large thing for our industry.
That's a major shift for the automotive industry that is happening over the last few years, right? From a product to a product plus a services sort of industry. I think that's a major trend, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes. Mr. Adman, sorry, sir, you were saying something. Okay. Mr. Danai, my next question is for you. So it's extremely important to measure not just the machine, but the entire process, right? What analytical strategies have you undertaken for creating more visibility in an end-to-end sort of manufacturing process?
Yeah, so in our case, I think a lot of our complexity arises from the business. We are, at last count, present in more than 20 very distinct business verticals, right from our Fevicol business to our construction chemicals business, to consumer products, to B2B in the pigments and other segments. So the nature of our business is the kind of end users we work with, the kind of outlets that we service, and the range of outlets that we service adds to a lot of complexity. Now, this complexity naturally translates into complexity at the manufacturing backend as well. So we have 50 manufacturing locations grouped in various clusters across the country, servicing all of these various product lines. I think what we realize is it's important from a manufacturing supply chain process perspective to create visibility across levels. starting from the unit head to the cluster head to the vice president of manufacturing to the director of manufacturing. Everyone needs to have a line of sight into certain parameters that need to be monitored on an ongoing basis. So we are in the process of setting up what we call a digital command center, which will essentially provide visibility across all of these levels, across all manufacturing facilities. So it will be some kind of a unified portal where all of these metrics will be possible and easy to monitor, particularly from an exception handling basis. And we are talking of parameters like production actuals versus production committed, cost of production, utility consumption, in-spec quality parameters, safety incidents, things like near misses or early warning alarms that need to be addressed, capacity utilization from a OEE perspective, preventive maintenance schedules, breakdowns, etc. So we're trying to get everything in one place and provide a line of sight to the relevant people so that that transparency is created and action can be taken before it's too late, rather than acting something post facto. So that's the way we are looking at it.
A real-time sort of command center that you're creating with sensors across the system.
Yeah, that's right. So the important thing is not to get into an elaborate project of upgrading all your manufacturing equipment. That's easier said than done, and it takes a number of years to do it. I think the more important thing is to have one place where whatever is available in the backend can be brought and presented, so that it's not hidden somewhere, it's rather visible and can be actioned.
Yeah, because the challenge, especially with brownfield plants, right? I mean, Industry 4.0 is great, but how do you sort of upgrade and add sensors across the new plants? It's easier to do in that sense. Mr. Arora, the next question. Can you highlight a few key trends regarding usage of analytics and measurement specific to the automotive industry, and what factors have led to the growth of these specific trends?
Okay, so I think the automotive industry in the complete value chain, I would say that digitalization is playing a great role from already to integrate the whole process, the complete value chain, right from the product development phase to the manufacturing engineering, followed by the manufacturing execution, and then taking it to the customer interfaces. So what I have seen and what is growing this is as a seamless integration of the complete product right up to the customer is what is driving today. You have the information available much faster. You have agility in the system. You can get efficient and you can get more precise. One of the challenges which we have always faced in the past was related to the customer delivery. So when you spoke about the KPIs with which we monitor finally, it depends on finally quality, efficiency, and flexibility. And you monitor them via SQDCM, the safety, quality, cost, delivery, and morale. I think morale we already spoke about, but from the point of view of delivery and other aspect, I would say that having the complete supply chain integrated to the manufacturing process through a robust production system definitely gives you a chance to be much closer to the customer and much closer to the customer expectation. And finally, our whole theme is to enhance customer experience. So I would say that on the delivery front, it is giving a lot of clarity, a lot of transparency right from the supply chain till the delivery process. If you look at quality aspects, I think the integration of IoT technologies into quality aspects, which not only results into you being able to digitally control your processes, so that, for example, the top delivery on the assembly lines can be digitally controlled through the processes, and you can achieve the type of quality which you are expected to, or the robotic glazing equipment, or robotic laser welding in the body manufacturing. So these are some of the examples which I can cite where you are integrating these processes to improve the quality, and not only improving the quality, you are capturing the quality data online. You are able to analyze that data much faster, and you can take corrective action. And retrieving of the data becomes that much easier. So then if you have a troubleshooting task, then you are able to even integrate your troubleshooting with all the informations. So I can only say that it is not only making the process more robust, addressing the quality aspect, it also addresses the efficiency and thereby gaining in the cost efficiency. So if your overall processes are focused on quality, flexibility, and efficiency, I think digitalization, what I have realized, or Industry 4.0 elements are the only way you can achieve this in a much faster way. And as I mentioned that in the past as well, that we were able to incorporate these. While I do agree that pandemic did accelerate the process of digitalization, but in our own strategy of sustainability, we already started on digitalization a few years back. The whole pandemic has accelerated the process, I would say, but it's not that it is giving birth to a new innovation which is taking place right now. And for me, all the research and innovation which we are doing right now, whether it is in the manufacturing execution process or the customer interface process, is going in this direction that you are able to integrate the complete value chain in such a way that finally at the end of the day, customer sees value for it. Because in my view and in our company's view, we have to remain customer centric and focused, and all our innovations have to be driven in the direction that through KPI monitoring, through digital tools, we are able to meet that expectation.
Interesting. I think one important point here is, of course, that most of the industry was already well poised, and maybe a silver lining in a very difficult period is that in terms of digitalization, many companies had already invested, and that sort of pace went up significantly. Maybe some sort of an adrenaline shot was given in the past few months. Mr. Agarwal, the same question to you, really. Can you highlight a few key trends regarding usage of analytics and measurement specific to the automotive industry, and what factors have led to the growth of this? I mean, Mr. Arora mentioned quality, customer centricity, I think one of the major focus areas, but Mr. Agarwal, over to you.
So yeah, obviously, so what Mr. Arora said, this digital quality validation of late taken up very rapidly because of one, lesser availability of manpower. So that has become really important. And now, though we had the wherewithal, every industry was poised to do it, some were already doing it, to move to the predictive state of be it maintenance or other areas. So probably prescriptive may be coming up next. And another important thing is that we are also thinking about reducing the risk. The exposures we are having in terms of, it can be in terms of capital, in terms of health, safety. So those are also becoming relatively important for all of us. Yeah, customer centricity for any industry remains the key, and everything is being designed in that area. So one of the other thing which I can talk about our industry is that we are focusing on improved go-to-market strategy, reducing the product development cycle times, probably which were taking 3x time, so we are trying to bring them to X, working in different modes. And just for an example, newer product lines are also being introduced. Like for JK Tire, we have started shelling out tire as a service model, which has become very pertinent. And we have also introduced a smart tire which comes fitted with a sensor and can be, so you can access the health of the tire from anywhere, any place. So these are the new trends that are setting in, not just because of the pandemic, but because of the people to have control on their assets. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Nabat Khan, coming to you, what are the thanks for waiting, by the way. We have a large panel and just coming to you now. What are the key strategies to keep in mind while adopting analytics to set up a bias-free measurement system?
Thank you very much, Rodra. In fact, thank you very much to each and everyone here, right? Great thoughts out here, industry leaders speaking, and it is overwhelming, specifically when I hear what Mr. Uppal spoke about, having a balanced scorecard versus what Mr. Danait spoke about, having the operational metrics in place, and then what Mr. Arora spoke about, amalgamation of IoT to the machine, keeping the customer in the center of it. And then we also heard from Mr. Agarwal talking about as to how are they going ahead and latching up onto the real-time tire insights and so on and so forth, and a lot of other metrics, right? So very, very interesting thoughts and very interesting aspects. The only piece that I want to just try to link all of this is by speaking of one of the examples. Now let's keep customer as a centric point, right? Now the way I want to devise this example, I'm just talking as these thoughts are just flowing in, and so I'm just going ahead and speaking about it or blabbering. Please, my apologies in case if at all I go here and there. But the way I visualize this is, let's assume we keep customer as a centric point. What's the customer facing? For example, if we talk about an automotive example, let's say my vehicle breaks down. I, as a customer, I'll be really, really dissatisfied. Right? The first thing that I'll do is I'll pick up my phone, I'll call up my call center. I'm actually going ahead and generating a lot of data there. And that data is in form of a lot of text. I'm just like going ahead and just complaining. The data is getting captured. All of that is in verbal textual format. Then, once that particular piece happens, what happens next? Probably the call center executive or the customer service executive is going to go ahead and raise a claim, or in fact, go ahead and raise a visit of a service technician or a dealer or however the construct is. Once that particular piece happens, somebody looks at the vehicle and they in turn again generate a lot of data, which may be in form of an inspection report. It may be a few of the clicks here and there on this system, or it may be a free flowing text again, which is nothing but the cost. The investigation cost that is going on. Then probably there is an action which is taken on it, and once the action is done, somebody may again input some text out there. So we've got tons of unstructured data which is in form of complaint, cause, and correction. While we're talking about all of this, there is also an element of going ahead and generating some structured data in terms of what part did I replace, what was my failure mode, and so on and so forth. In the entire journey that I spoke about, we've generated a lot of data from the customer standpoint, from the service center standpoint. We are using this data to link it back to even my supply chain angle of it, of ensuring that I pick up the right part and the right part is available for me to fix the issue and so on and so forth. So a lot of moving components. Now, the key realm that we spoke about is focusing on uplifting this customer's experience. Today, I as a customer may be unhappy, but do I want to see the similar issue happening again in the field? The answer is no. So how can I as an organization be well prepared, leveraging the power of analytics? That's where exactly analytics comes into play, because you're playing around with a lot of textual data and the structured data as well. Can I, as an organization, look at all of this, combine all of this data, loop the failure back to the assembly line or the specific workstation where I assembled this particular part on the vehicle? Can I link that? Can I collect a lot of other information from my telematics devices which are in my vehicle? I can link all of that today given the advancement of the technology that we have at disposal today, right? If I'm able to link up my telematics data, my field failure data, my call center data, back to my production plan data and pin it down to a specific section where this particular part was assembled, I will be able to go ahead and save a lot of future failures, right? So that's how I'll try to link all of this with respect to ensuring that irrespective of whether we keep customer centricity at the center point, or we look at the cost angle, or we look at the time angle. So the way I again talk about always is for manufacturing realm, irrespective of any kind of a metric, for me it will be time, cost, and quality. Right? So these are the three angles which we'll have to manage to ensure that we maintain the equilibrium while we can link it up to customer, supplier, to our in-house employees. We can link it up to our internal processes and so on and so forth. Right? So that's what I'm trying to I'll try and sum this up saying probably we'll have to make use of a lot of information which is already at our disposal to ensure that we meet the right metric, we ensure that we go ahead and attack the right metric to uplift whatever the goal that we try to set forward. Right? That's it, Rodra. Thank you. I'll pass it on back to you.
Mr. Dhanaj,
a little bit of a broader question, changing sort of the gear. Has the pandemic played any role in shifting the focus from metrics you were targeting earlier, based on what you're seeing right now? Volatile supply-demand curve, changing consumer sentiments. The metrics that you were looking earlier and now, have they sort of changed as a result?
Yeah, sure. I mean, if this sounds like a lifetime ago, but the pandemic hit us, I guess, sometime in the March of last year. And very early in the lockdown, our leadership mandated the setting up of two internal teams within the company. One team which was focused on the here and now and the firefighting that was required as we went into a lockdown and then as we gradually started coming out of it. And the second one that was focused on the longer term imperatives of winning in the post-pandemic world. It was very clear that the world is going to shift significantly, and a significantly different approach would be required to win in that world. The pandemic itself created a very volatile situation for the entire supply chain, right from the availability of raw material, packing material from the vendors, the logistics to bring it to the plant, the labor availability at the plant because of the migrant worker crisis, the outbound logistics, warehouse operations, customers visiting, and the ability of customers and consumers to actually visit retail outlets. Everything, the entire supply chain was impacted at that point of time. Then, as we gradually started coming out of the lockdown, we had localized lockdowns, which added further to the unpredictability. So we were, if you recollect, we were looking at a very dynamically changing red, green, yellow zones across the country, and so red, green, yellow zones were from a manufacturing logistics perspective, whereas from a sales operations perspective. For example, how would we handle supplies in a situation where the market was green, but the supplying plant was red? So we needed a totally different set of dashboards to kind of monitor, navigate the situation. The metrics that we were tracking, the frequency of the metrics, the kind of metrics, were all, underwent a change for that period of 4, 5, 6 months till we actually unlocked. So accordingly, we designed something very simple, but which gave us a lot of visibility across the organization. So we designed an order status kind of dashboard, which would tell the entire sales hierarchy what the overall fulfillment situation was looking like, and you could drill down right to what the status of an order was, whether it was pending, whether it was shipped, when it would be shipped, etc., etc. So sounds like a simple enough thing, but the reality is that such a report is never there in the organization. Such a dashboard never exists because it's not required during normal times. But something as simple as that created the kind of information symmetry that we needed for the supply chain to run as we gradually stabilized. So some of these things which were created visibility and created information symmetry rather helped us than anything very fancy. Now the second team that we created was focused on those few long-term trends that are here to stay. So things like remote working, for example, digital, we already referred to. It was very clear that a lot of our engagement that used to happen in person has now moved to engaging in digital. In a digital mode of engagement. For example, even the contractor meets that we did, the carpenter meets that we did, previously we used to do it one-on-one. We used to do it in person, either one-on-one or in a group meeting. They all seamlessly shifted to a digital mode of meeting. E-commerce clearly was another trend that was here to stay. So these two teams that we internally called the Act Now team and the Plan Now team, were focused, which are cross-functional teams, focused, one of them on the here and now and building, establishing and chasing those metrics that were required in that volatile situation, and the other that was planning more strategically into the future. And I think that helped us both recover our business and get in some strategic plans in place for the future.
Very, very interesting. Mrs. Walker, would you want to sort of add to that, maybe from a bit of a global or American perspective, as in how has the pandemic sort of changed the focus on the metrics, so to say? I mean, because of course the last 9 months have been very difficult in terms of supply chain, consumers, and you did mention that how you use epidemiological, I can't pronounce it right.
Epidemiological,
the studies, right? to figure out this thing. So would love to hear a bit more on that. It sounds quite
Well,
interesting.
Yeah, I have found this absolutely fascinating. Part of it is my husband works in healthcare, and so I've been able to see what he's been looking at, you know, from a healthcare perspective, and then how that industry is informing so much of what's happening in our other industries. And I loved what you just said about having two teams, one looking at the here and now and one looking in the future. Because what I have definitely seen is sort of this change in understanding what really matters to manufacturers at the end of the day is not the equipment and is not the products, but is the people. And in some cases, that's your human resources. And I loved what Mr. Aurora was saying about retention, because all over the globe, we're seeing that getting and retaining the best talent that can understand the advanced manufacturing technologies of today is hard, because there's a lot of competition for that talent. And then also the human element of the customers. And what's important that I've seen is to not only focus on what the metrics are, but the why of those metrics. Because the human, the worker and the customer, they want to understand why you're measuring that. I have a favorite example of, you know, people often don't go talk to the maintenance engineers. They know a lot. They have all the secrets. And understanding, I had a company that was focused on keeping the boilers running all the time to make sure there would be no downtime. And so that's what they were asked to do. That was the metric they were going towards. So they did. Well, come to find out, the backup boiler had been running for 25 years. I'm not kidding you, 25 years. And had never been used. So they kept it running all the time, just in case production went down and they could switch over to it. Well, if your metric is sustainability, like what Mr. Aurora was speaking to, maybe you shouldn't be measuring whether that boiler is up all the time. I think the pandemic has shifted all of our perspectives and allowed us to look at other areas. So for example, taking epidemiological models in, taking in government data about shutdowns and worker spacing and restrictions on health, taking in customer sentiment. About a year ago, most of the people I knew were not willing to do, say, online grocery shopping. That shifted really quickly. So it's just allowed us to have a more holistic view of what really matters. And I think it's a really exciting time to be involved in this type of work, because we've all seen that manufacturing is at the center of addressing this, whether it's creating PPE like masks and so forth, creating vaccines, keeping people mobile, keeping people employed. It's a really exciting time.
Thank you. Mr. Aurora, would you like to add to this? I think you were touching upon this point earlier, you know, the metrics before and after sort of, you know, the pandemic situation. How have the key metrics, sort of focus metrics, changed in that time, or have they changed at all? Yeah.
Sure. I think so. I was very much able to correlate to what Mr. Daneth was talking about when he spoke about the containment zones, and as we call them, the yellow, green, red zones. They're for sure to tackle that situation. While I can also confer that we also created similar kind of dashboards for ourselves, but we actually created a COVID-19 dashboard. I hope that we don't need to use it for a longer period of time, but we did create a COVID-19 dashboard to monitor both supply chain and people availability. And every day having this containment zones changing also restricted people movement and people availability on the shop floors. So you had the situation that a person is available today who's already started when we restarted in a graded manner. The next day he's not, because his area has gone into containment zone. And here I think the data points which changed, which we had to monitor very clearly. And here our existing production system really helped, where we capture the flexibility metrics of our employees in our system, so that based on the availability of the people and based on their flexibility metrics, you can decide the lineup for the line, and you can decide who can work on what kind of line. So these are some things which were never so unpredictable. So not only in the supply chain situation, where I think many of panelists would agree that supply chain was extremely disrupted and volatile. While the demand was picking up, supply chain was one area which you had to focus on. And in our case, it was even more complicated when we are looking for a global supply chain spread across 4 continents, right from US, China, Europe, and of course India. And when you have to streamline the complete supply chain with the demand requirement and to make sure with the availability of resources in terms of containment zone, it was a totally different KPI which we were monitoring at that point in time. I think we were able to adapt to that, and I would say that at one point in time, you realize that how the digital data and the availability of this data, which you can analyze much faster, really helps you to overcome these challenges. So I can very emphatically say that there were a lot of other matrices which had to be monitored, and finally they had to be also monitored via our dashboard, and we did that. And yeah, I hope that we don't have to monitor the COVID-19 dashboard for a long period of time.
Yeah, I mean, completely with you there, sir. And very, very interesting, right? So, did you really end up multi-skilling people on the shop floor, like a welder would also be ending up doing a paint job, maybe, because you don't know if the guy will be available tomorrow, right? So, I'm just curious.
Absolutely, and then there I was talking about this AR/VR technology which we use, and if we knew that the person who's in containment is not likely to come, our app came handy so that we can load for him those relevant training modules which he can then undergo and at least reduce some amount of time when he comes on the job and is able to then perform on a different station or a different function altogether.
Very interesting. I think clearly said that, of course, in an analog world, this would have never been possible. I mean, thank God we are at a certain level to be able to sort of scale up our digital sort of tools, etc., that we use today. I'm going to go on to the second poll of the day, and then just 2 more questions, and we'll call it day, just sharing my poll. Yeah, I'm going to read it out because I don't know if all our panelists can also see it or not. Measurement systems analysis, MSA, should be applied when, and we have 4 choices. This is a multiple choice option as well. The first one is there is a new manufacturing process. The second is there is a new product to manufacture. The third, there are customer concerns, and finally all of the above. Again, keeping this open for about 40 seconds, actually a minute. Polls are very interesting. I think you suddenly see a spike of people replying after like 20-25 seconds, because I think people are consuming the information in the first 20 seconds. So, yeah, just closing the poll. And here are the results. Again, all of the above. 62% said all of the above. So, measurement systems analysis should be applied when 62% said all of the above, and 23% said when there is a new manufacturing process. Great. My next question, this is for Mr. Rupal. A modern car comes with a host of different sensors, and this can, of course, collect huge amounts of customer data, right? I mean, we did touch upon the telematics aspect of it. What role can analytics play in measuring this data for more informed product manufacturing, right? Taking it back to the manufacturing and even probably the design stage, right?
Yes, I think the amount of data now available from the field about usage of your car, and that to a real time from there, both from point of view of customer service and also as a feedback to your whole design process to improve. I think is a big change which is going to happen. It started happening now, and for that you need a very strong architecture of IT to really consume the data and manage that, whether it's and the matrices could be many and all, whether speed, transmission, the customer safety, driver preferences, and so on and so forth. I think there's large amount of matrices which can be consumed to improve your customer service or improve your design process per se. But going forward, I think integrating with the other environment parameter, monetizing this and try to be more customer centric will be a next phase we will getting into. And we're trying to look for those opportunity with through a partner ecosystem so that you can monetize and start give the customer service based on that. I think that will be a new trend which will be, I mean, all of the auto industry will be working on to ensure that we get into that.
Very interesting. I think insurers are also using this data increasingly to price premium.
That's anyway in place right now.
Right. Okay, Mr. Kumar, Mr. Agarwal, have previously considered measurement metrics been altered by the pandemic, right? I mean, how has analytics helped you stay on top of market trends in order to create a more agile supply chain?
So
this is
actually,
really
I like to break it into three phases. One was a phase of shutdown in which we were not manufacturing anything, but still there was some emergency demand for ambulances or some essential supply vehicles. But then again, so as Mr. Denet has pointed out, if I was having a tire in a different zone, so the established supply chain networking had to be reworked. So that was one, but because tires had to be provided for emergency use. So that was one phase. But in that phase, the metrics that apart from this managing the network, the important metrics was how were we collaborating and engaging with our partners and our employees to keep them interested to learn new things. And we also conducted, because we also have a hospital within our group. So we conducted many medical sessions with expert doctors to just to let people get acquainted with what COVID is, not to fear from it, and how to stay safe. And then the phase two was when we started with a minimal workforce. In some cases, about 25%, 50%. So the metrics from OEE shifted to OLE, overall labor utilization. Means we were looking more at higher utilization than getting at the higher yield. So that was the shift in the interim, because with 50% or 25% of the workforce, we were trying to get 30% or 60% of the output. So yield, overall equipment efficiency was not that much important. And not to say that the raw materials and other supplies were in shortage for everyone. And then came the phase three when things started getting normal, but not 100% normal. So then there was a different sort of matrices in which we were looking at how agile we are, how we can do it first time right, and probably more importantly, can we do it on time? How compliant we are, how we are taking care of our employees. So these were all different sort of matrices that we were trying to measure. But yes, ultimately for any industry, the ultimate aim is to be to bring value to all the stakeholders. So that was the overall impact.
Thank you. My last question for them, this is for Mr. Khan. What are the key challenges around measurements that effective utilization of analytics can solve?
Again, thank you, Rodra. So challenges per se, if I need to just link it back to the overall aspect that we've heard throughout the session today. Data is not a big challenge because fortunately, unfortunately, because of COVID, a lot of digitization happened. A lot of data which was not available earlier is available in the system today, right? So we cannot blame saying we don't have data. So that's not a key challenge for us anymore. The way I visualize this, probably I'll invite everyone's thoughts as well, post I put this particular comment, because this is something which I believe, the way I again see this and believe this as well, is we are not still in a position to go ahead and depend on the technology and the system and the tools. We are still a little reluctant, a little hesitant of letting the systems figure out or identify those anomalies, identify those trends, and let us know that, guys, what you've been measuring, though it is directionally right, but there are a couple of other impacting layers as well, which we've not seen so far. That's something which we may probably have to overcome and let the systems tell us that there are a certain other important variables in the entire measurement gamut that we are not looking at. which can give us substantial uplift in terms of where we need to take the organization as leaders. Right? So that's exactly my thought, but let me hear the industry leaders' thoughts as well, because I may be way off than what everyone has thought about.
Mr. Danai, anything to add to that? And before we call it a day, yeah.
No, I think this is very fair. For example, you take a process like demand forecasting and how we used to do demand forecasting before in the good old days. I mean, the traditional forecasting processes are fairly siloed and they use basic time series model kind of forecasting that pretty much ignores everything except historical sales and maybe some events that influence sales like seasonality or some calamities or promotions and campaigns that you ran, etc. But I think the question, and this is something that interests us as an organization quite deeply, is can we look at incorporating machine learning into our forecasting process, for example, that can look at a variety of other data, structured as well as unstructured data. For example, can it look at political data? Can it look at taxation? Can it look at regulatory? Can it look at legal? For some of our businesses, can it look at weather systems, for example? Our waterproofing businesses would be highly dependent on monsoon and very localized predictions on monsoon. So you don't necessarily have to build everything yourself, but through the wonderful API ecosystem that's available, there's a lot of data that you can potentially access and use to your benefit. So I think, yes, it's probably time to up our game in some of these processes that we've been running in a certain manner and looking at data in a certain manner by incorporating machine learning, self-learning algorithms, etc. that can train itself to look at new data and new types of data without necessarily the need for external intervention.
Great. And I think one of the best parts is that, in the past 9 months or so, this is actually part of the CEO's agenda, right? I mean, this is a lot more focused now today than it ever was. So just making it happen is far more easier than before. Mr. Arora, Mr. Agarwal, any closing comments, any thoughts before I just sort of say bye?
Okay, I can very much correlate to the other panelists what they mentioned. The Industry 4.0 is revolutionizing manufacturing for sure, but it has to be accompanied with the embracing of new technology as well, and it's a mindset change. It takes all of us are used to our habits, and it takes for the whole organization to embrace digitalization is a process. I think we started this journey, as I said, a few years back already, realizing that this is one of the key pillars for our sustainability targets. But pandemic really accelerated that process. And the mindset change would take little longer time than the technological advancements which are happening right now under Industry 4.0.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, sir.
I would like to build up on what Mr. Arora said, because some time back, some of the, I would say, some of the industry CEOs were treating data more like a person in middle of sea who would say that water everywhere, not a drop to drink. So it was data everywhere without getting any real insight. But that thought, that mindset has been changing. So just building on what Mr. Arora said, that mindset change is very important to get key insights from data. Data-driven key insights, KPIs, is the way to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Walker, anything to add to what our panelists are saying today? Thank you. I mean, we had a great session.
Yeah, I think the key thing to do is to talk to other industries as well. So I'm very fortunate that I work in a practice that has experts in healthcare and banking and retail and government. And I love learning best practices from them. So for example, right now, Mr. Arora spoke to the importance of customer experience. Well, the retail industry has a lot of best practices there. The banking industry surprisingly has a lot of experience with real-time analytics and edge analytics because of credit card transactions. The healthcare industry can teach us about the epidemiological models and how to use that modeling to understand our staffing. So broaden your network beyond just your manufacturing peers and learn some best practices from them.
Thank you. So that brings us to the end of our discussion today. I think we had a very good chat, good conversation, very senior leaders with us today across the industry, and Mrs. Walker also joining us all the way from the US. Thank you for joining us today. I want to especially thank our guest speakers for taking the valuable time out to share their insights. A big shout out to SAS for partnering with us for this series. We will be back again with the next episode soon. Take care and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.